In this video, we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations. So the first thing that we need to look at is to see what it is that we have here. In order to solve a quadratic equation, our equation has to be in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Because when we're solving, we are finding the 0 of the function. So if we recall, the 0 of the function is where y equals 0. So if this were equal to y, instead of y, it's equal to 0. So this looks pretty good until we get to this side, which means that we have to put this equation, set it equal to 0. So that means I need this side to be 0. And I'm picking this side to be 0 because our lead coefficient, which is a number right in front of our x squared, is positive. So that means I'm going to subtract 2, and I'm going to add 2x, add 2x. So I want to make sure that I line everything up nicely. So I did this in one step. You can still do it in 2 steps, but if you're systematic, you'll be fine. So this has nothing added to it, so this is 5x squared. I add these two together, I get 32x, and 14 minus 2 gives me positive 12. Net 2 minus 2 is 0, negative 2x, and 2x is 0. So now this is in the form that I want. So now I have to go ahead and factor. So the first thing I'm going to look for is my greatest common factor. I have 5, 32, and 12, so there are none. So then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to set up my x to create my system. So here I have 5x squared times 12, which gives me 60x squared, and I have 32x in the middle. So what are my factors of 60x squared that add up to 32x? So I know x squared is x times x, and I do also know that if I have 30 times 2, I get 60. And if I do 30 plus 2, I get 32. So this is what I've been working for right here. That takes the place of 32. So that means now I rewrite this to be 5x squared plus 30x plus 2x plus 12 equals 0. So I'm just bringing this equals 0 for the ride. I'm not going to do anything over here. It just comes along. So I'm going to do factoring the way I've been factoring. I'm going to split it into 2 groups. A common factor in my first group is 5x. So that means I divide the 5x out. 5x squared divided by 5x gives me x. 30x divided by 5x gives me 6. In the second group, common factor is a positive 2. So I'm going to write plus 2. 2x divided by 2 gives me x. 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. And then I'm just going to write equals 0 on the end. So I can see that I have 2 factors that are the same. X plus 6 is the same as x plus 6. I'm going to divide that out. So by dividing that out, that means that this comes here, x plus 6, and then I have 5x plus 2, and that equals 0. So I have to do it like this in order to solve for x. So let me explain to you what it is that we're doing here. So I have x plus 6 times 5x plus 2. If I had some number for x here that made this 0, then that would be 0 times 5x plus 2 equals 0. And 0 times anything equals 0. So if I set my factor x plus 6 equal to 0, that would make that true. Well, what would the value of x be? Subtract 6 on both sides. So if x is negative 6, and I were to put it in here, negative 6 plus 6 times 5 times negative 6 plus 2, that will equal 0. So this here would be 0, and then this here would be times 28, and that clearly equals 0. So that works. So I set this factor equal to 0. Well, the same principle holds if I have 5x plus 2, and that is 0. Doesn't matter what side these are on, I'm just going to do it like that. So if 5x2 were 0, then this whole thing would equal 0 as well, just like I proved here. So let's set our other factor, 5x plus 2 equal to 0. And so I'm going to subtract 2 from each side. That gives me 5x equals negative 2. And then I divide by 5. So that gives me x is equal to negative 2/5. So my zeros are where x is negative 6 and where x is negative 2/5. The other way I could write this is x is negative 6, y is 0, x is negative 2/5, y is 0. So this here is my solution. So let me just show you in the calculator how that would look in the calculator. So in my calculator, I put in my original, or I shouldn't say my original, I put in this equation here after I got it set to 0. There is another way you could do it, but we're going to keep it like this for now. And when I graph it, if you remember, my zeros are on that x-axis because that x-axis is the equation y equals 0. So you can see I have an x-intercept here and an x-intercept here. So I'm going to go to second trace, and I'm looking for the 0 of my function. I'm going to pick number 2. I want the left side first. Even though this is left bound, I'm going to go left of the left. So if you see, my x here is getting closer to negative 6. Eventually it's going to come up. Okay, I'm not to the left. Here I'm to the left, and I'm going to show you why. Well, it's hard to see. But there's a vertical line coming right down here. And so the point I want is to the left. Now it's asking me right bound. So I'm going to move to the other side. And you can see there are 2 arrows pointing in the center, and there's a wall right there. The point I want is right in the middle. So I'm going to put enter, and you can see that x equals negative 6. So I pointed this out before. When we get e to the negative 11, something like this, this is essentially the number 0. So this is negative 6, 0. So let's find this 0 over here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Second trace, I'm going to go to my 0, which is number 2. It's asking me for left bound. So the point that I want is here. I'm going to move my cursor closer. Eventually it's going to come up. There it is. So this point is left of this one. I'm going to push enter, and you can see there is a little line that comes to the left. It's now asking for right bound, so I'm going to move my calculator to the right. I push enter. You can see the arrows at the top. The point I want is in between. I push enter again, and you can see it went right there. Now notice this is negative 0.4. Here I have negative 2/5. So I have to go, I want it in fraction form in this case because this is factorable, so I have to make it as a fraction. So if I do second quit and I put in negative 0.4 math frac, it's going to give me negative 2/5. So that's how I could find my zeros using the calculator. There's one more thing that I want to show you is I could go to my table and look for where y is 0. The only problem with doing this is notice it's only showing me my negative 6 value. It's not showing me my negative 2/5. And I have to remember that it's where y is 0. This would be the wrong answer. Where y is 0 is where I'm looking.